Hi, I'm Stuart Ryan. In this video, I'm going to show you various ways to play the G chord on guitar. This is a really common key for guitar players, and it's one of the easier keys to use. Of the 7 chords in G major, 5 of them can be played in the open position. That's G, A minor, C, D, and E minor. You've heard this in everything from AC/DC's You Shook Me All Night Long to Aretha Franklin's Respect. Let's start off with some open position shapes. There are a couple of ways you can play the G major in the open position. Let's start with this shape. For that one, I'm using the 2nd finger on the 3rd fret of the E string, the 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, the D, G, and B are open, and then my 3rd finger is on the 3rd fret of the E string. With that one, make sure the D, G, and B ring open so the 1st finger isn't accidentally muting the D string. If that happens, just roll onto the fingertips. And you can also play that chord with this shape. All that's changed is on the B and E strings, I've got the 3rd finger at the 3rd fret of the B string and the 4th finger at the 3rd fret of the E string like this. So the sound of the chord just changes a bit slightly. You can also play the G chord as a bar chord. We'll go from here. We'll slide up to frets 5 and 4. And then put a 1st finger bar across the 3rd fret. And with that shape, try rolling the 1st finger over to the side a little bit so you get onto the bony side of the finger, which helps with fretting the bar down. And of course that shape's movable, so when you've learned it in G, you can move it up and down the frets to work with different keys. If it's proving to be a little bit tricky down there, try working on the higher frets like C or D to begin with, where the frets are closer together and the string tension is lower. We can also use the A shape, and we'll take that up to the 12th fret and put the bar across the 10th fret. That's a G major chord up at the 10th fret of the A string. There are a couple of challenges with that chord shape. First, you want to make sure that you don't play the open E string against that chord. It's a great sounding chord, but you've got an E minor there. So make sure either you're barring all the way across the 10th fret or just using the tip of the index finger to rest against the low E string to mute it. And also, playing the high E string can be a challenge in that shape. So some players will ignore the high E string and they'll use the 3rd finger to rest and partially bar across the 12th fret of the D, G, and B strings. If you're careful with the bar, you can actually catch the 10th fret of the E string in that shape as well. But it's a more challenging shape that many players ignore. Here are some alternatives for G chords. Let's take a look at a G7 down in the open position. This one's really common in the key of C, where G is the 5 chord. So for that shape, I've got the 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the low E string, the 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, the D, G, and B are open, and the 1st finger is on the 1st fret of the high E string. G major 7 chords also sound great. This is typically more common in things like soul, blues, jazz, and bossa nova, where the G is the 1 chord. Here's a G major 7. So for that chord, I've got the 1st finger on the 3rd fret of the E string, the 3rd finger's on the 4th fret of the D string, the 4th finger is beneath that on the 4th fret of the G string, and then finally the 2nd finger is on the 3rd fret of the B string. And generally you can strum down from the 6th string because you'll find the 1st finger just mutes the open A string. Although some players will actually hook the thumb over the top and play the chord like this. And they might even add in the open A string, which will give you a G major 9 chord. But really, this one's more common. And finally, here's a great chord that's common in bossa nova and soul and blues as well, and particularly jazz. This is the first inversion G major chord. So that chord has a different character because the third of the chord is in the bass, the B, on fret 7 of the low E string. So for this fingering, I've got the second finger on the 7th fret of the low E string, the first finger on the 5th fret of the D string, that's the root note G, the third finger on the 7th fret of the G string, and then I've got the fourth finger on the 8th fret of the B string, that's another G. That one's quite a stretch, so if you're new to that shape, spend some time getting used to it. But that one's commonly used when people want to move from a G to a C, because the B in the root just moves up a semitone to the root of the next chord, the C. It's a really smooth movement. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed that tour of the G major chord shapes and variations. It's very common, so spend as much time as you can on all of those shapes. Don't forget to subscribe to Guitar World, and I'll see you next time. Take care.